Everything that happened started with a road that didn't exist on any map. The people waiting at the end of it already knew I was coming. This happened in the fall of 1977, out past Cotter County, on a stretch of isolated gravel, the rural electric co-op called Line 9. I was 22, working as a line checker, driving a green Ford pickup with a bad clutch, and a CB radio bolted under the dash. The morning after a massive autumn storm, Delbert radioed me from the office. A caller had reported severe voltage drops out on Route 9. "Which farm?" I asked. "Not sure," Delbert said, pausing strangely. "The work order just says Aldous Tract. Follow Line 9 past the Kessler place. There's an unmarked cutoff." I'd worked the county for 2 years and never heard of it. The cutoff was just 2 deep ruts disappearing into a dense stand of cottonwoods. The moment I turned onto it, the canopy closed overhead, instantly swallowing the gray afternoon light and plunging the truck into premature dusk. Overgrown branches raked down both sides of the cab, a relentless, screeching drag of wood on metal that sounded like fingernails clawing at the doors. The mud was deep and waterlogged. Twice the truck violently fishtailed, and the worn-out clutch gave off a sickening whine as I struggled to keep from stalling. When the trees finally broke, the headlights caught the fence. It wasn't a farm fence. This was chain link, 8 feet high, topped with security wire, running in a jarringly straight line through the wilderness. The heavy gate hung crooked on a single hinge. I drove through. 200 yards ahead sat the building, a low, windowless cinder-block structure with a flat tar roof and a single gray steel door. Off to the side, a diesel generator hummed inside a shed, a low, steady grind that meant the site was fully active. My stomach dropped when I looked at the power poles. Whoever built this place had run an enormous, illegal line straight into the co-op grid, completely bypassing a meter. I cut the engine. The silence outside was absolute, save for the generator. Churned up in the fresh mud were heavy tire tracks and a second set of fresh, deep boot prints heading towards the building. Someone had walked here minutes before me. Behind the structure sat an old single-wide trailer, its windows painted pitch black from the inside. A folding chair sat out front next to a coffee can filled with dry cigarette butts. Whoever sat there had done it after the downpour. I turned back toward the cinder block building, and that's when I heard it. Click. It was the sharp mechanical snap of an old electrical relay, followed by the gritty, low whir of a servo motor cutting through the wind. I froze and looked up. Mounted under the eave was an industrial security camera. It was pivoting, slowly, deliberately, until the thick glass lens stopped dead center, locked straight onto my face. A wave of pure ice hit my chest. Someone on the other end of that lens was sitting in front of a monitor right then, staring at my face, while I stood entirely exposed in their yard. Against every ounce of sanity, driven by sheer adrenaline, I walked up to the steel door. It wasn't locked. It swung open with a gentle push. Inside, the air was freezing and smelled heavily of ozone and fresh coffee toner. Long fluorescent lights flickered over rows of gray metal shelving that stretched deep into the shadows, stacked floor to ceiling with cardboard boxes and industrial file cabinets. I walked down a cross aisle and yanked open a random drawer. Inside was a spiral binder, thick as a phone book, packed with technical schematics, grid diagrams marked in red pencil, and radio frequency charts. I flipped the pages until I hit a tabbed section explicitly labeled with my own county's name. It was a clinical log of local property coordinates, timeline windows, and grid loads going back a year. At the bottom of the page, underlined twice in bold print, was a single typewritten line. Phase 2. Grid integration complete. This wasn't a hidden building. It was the nerve center of an invisible network that had quietly wired itself completely beneath the county. Then the heavy scrape of metal on concrete echoed from a back room, followed by the slow, heavy thud of approaching boots. My body paralyzed for 4 agonizing seconds before panic broke the lock on my legs. I dropped the binder, bolted out the steel door, and ran frantically across the yard. I threw myself into the cab, my hands shaking so violently it took 2 tries to force the key into the ignition. The engine fired, but the moment I slammed my foot down, the worn-out clutch completely slipped. The engine revved into a useless scream, the tires spun wildly, and the truck stayed trapped in the mud. I looked in the side mirror. A silhouette had emerged from the building, stepping out onto the concrete loading dock. He didn't run. He didn't even walk fast. He just stood there, completely unhurried, watching my wheels spin because he knew the truck was caught. I slammed the pedal, pumping the clutch twice until the gears finally ground together and bit down clean. The tires caught traction, flinging a wall of muck into the air as the truck shot forward. I violently fishtailed back into the cottonwoods, the branches screaming against the metal cab all over again, and I didn't stop flooring the engine until I hit the gravel of Line 9. I radioed Delbert, my voice shaking so badly he could barely understand me. Within the hour, Sheriff Loomis and 2 deputies met me at the office and drove out to the site. I refused to go back with them. They returned 3 hours later. Loomis looked permanently shaken. He told me the building, the fence, and the trailer were all there, but the interior was entirely bare concrete. Every shelf, box, file cabinet, and piece of radio equipment had been systematically scrubbed and cleared out in less than 4 hours, vanishing into a county with only 1 paved exit road. The illegal wiretap was the only thing left. A week later, state inspectors officially filed the incident as a routine stolen utility case. Nobody ever wrote down what was inside that building. Before I left the station that night, Sheriff Loomis pulled me aside into the dark hallway. "Stop talking about this," he said in a low whisper. "2 of my deputies got anonymous calls at their homes an hour ago. Just a voice telling them they'd seen enough for one day." I quit the co-op that winter and moved 2 counties over. I have never driven Route 9 since. A year after I left, a letter arrived at my new address. No return address, postmarked 3 states away. Inside was a single sun-faded Polaroid of that cinder block building exactly the way it looked the afternoon I stood in the yard. Nothing was written on it. I burned it in my wood stove that night. I moved twice more after that, and I've kept an unlisted number ever since. Every so often, when I'm driving a back road at night and my headlights catch a chain link fence running a little too straight, a little too far from any farmhouse, my chest goes tight, and I think about that silhouette standing on the loading dock, completely still, watching me go. I never found out who he was, and I can't help but wonder whose coordinates are sitting in those binders tonight.